Besides the injuries, this was an incredibly fun week for fantasy football. We're going to talk about everything that happened, everything that matters, starting with the Eagles-Bengals game. There were a zillion points scored in fantasy, but in reality, not much changes, right? Jalen Hurts was my QB2 coming into this week, and I think that he stays there rest of season only behind Lamar Jackson. Obviously, with the 3 rushing touchdowns you get from Jalen Hurts, it is going to eat into what you have from Barkley. It's going to eat into what you get from A.J. Brown. But fundamentally, does anything change in this Eagles offense? No. Saquon Barkley is still a high-end RB1 rest of season. A.J. Brown's still a mid-wide receiver 1 rest of season. Devonta Smith is still a wide receiver 2. You're still starting every single one of these players every single week, regardless of the matchup. And yeah, Dallas Goedert will come back in a couple weeks. Then maybe we can get Goddard in as well. Nothing changes in Philly. I know maybe on the surface, some things change here in Cincy. We'll start it off with Burrow. Here, nothing changes. Obviously, it's not a great day for Burrow, but at the same time, you had no T. Higgins. It wasn't a phenomenal matchup going up against the Eagles, so I don't want to move Burrow down our rankings dramatically. I still view him a tier ahead of those streaming quarterbacks, a tier behind the guys that are going to give you the rushing upside, such as Lamar, Hurts, Daniels, Allen. Obviously, that's the top tier of QBs. Joe Burrow's like mid quarterback 1 in fantasy. Still think he stays there. Somebody you start every single week. Going over to the running backs, the usage is obviously something that we want to continue to track. And this week, you actually have Zach Moss with 30 snaps in comparison to Chase Brown with 28. Does this matter for fantasy? Not particularly, because Chase Brown's the guy with the 12 carries and the rushing touchdown. Zach Moss, the guy with only 5 carries. Chase Brown, yes, he doesn't see as many targets as Zach Moss out of the backfield. So maybe how this is shaping up in Cincy is in game environments in which the Bengals lead and they're able to run the ball consistently in the second half. Maybe it's a little bit more Chase Brown. And in the game environments which they're trailing, maybe we see a little bit more Zach Moss. But I'm still starting Chase Brown most weeks and still benching Zach Moss. And viewing Moss as like the desperation play that's almost a premium handcuff back if Brown were to go down. Jamar Chase, still top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. Start him every single week. I'm going over to Mike Gesicki. I know Gesicki leads the team in receiving, and maybe people are going to be convinced that he's an interesting waiver wire pickup. In reality, I don't think you should waste your time. In reality, I think you are going to be getting back in T. Higgins either next week or the week after. And when that does happen, I think Gesicki goes right back to what he was previously. As somebody you're not interested in, keep in mind they are just going out there and throwing a ton of tight ends onto the field. Gesicki only plays 31 out of 58 potential snaps. Gesicki only runs 24 out of 40 potential routes. So I know some people maybe are excited about Gesicki. I think this is more so just a function of Higgins not playing. It's not going to be reliable going forward. Going over to the Patriots, I feel like a clown. Okay. How many times am I going to get suckered into playing Ramondre Stevenson the week that he gives you absolutely nothing and then bench him the week that he goes off? Ramondre Stevenson, 20 carries. What do you have from JaMychal Hasty what do you have from Antonio Gibson? Nothing. Ramondre Stevenson sees 55 out of 67 potential snaps. Ramondre Stevenson sees 20 carries in comparison only 5 to Antonio Gibson. Ramondre Stevenson sees 3 targets out of this backfield. No other running back has a single target. I don't know what to do here with Ramondre. Okay. Maybe in game environments in which the Patriots are favored, we can go ahead and we can start Ramondre Stevenson. Issue is there won't be too many of those games. I just freaking hate it, right? I mean, it looks like he is back to being a 3-down running back, but I feel like I'm going to rank this guy as a top 24 option next week. I'm going to start him myself, and then he's going to give us nothing. Obviously, we had the Drake May injury. Absolutely sucks. If Brissett's under center, then at that point, none of the receivers are interesting. And looking at the receivers in general here, I know some people are upset with us for having Demario Douglas a little bit lower, but I do just want to reiterate that they're going to be really spreading the ball out to a ton of different options. So I still stand by. None of the Patriots receivers are startable. If you wanted to go with anybody, it would be Douglas, but I'm not interested. And if Drake May's under center, then Hunter Henry is viable. But if it's Jacoby Brissett, probably not excited enough about the passing offense. Going over to the Jets, this is another frustrating thing, right? Changing coaching staff, we initially see that Braylon Allen's an afterthought. Breece Hall gets absolutely everything. And what happens this week? Tony 12 carries for Braylon Allen with the goal line rushing touchdown, 16 carries for Breece Hall. All of a sudden, this is turning right back into a situation in which Breece gets 60% of the backfield. Braylon Allen gets 40%. If it's Jets offense is a debacle, I think I heard on the broadcast that they called 3 offensive timeouts in the first quarter. And that was the first time that it happened in like 10 plus years. Jets team's falling apart. I mean, if you're looking at Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, they are going to get everything here. I know Tyler Conklin comes away with the receiving touchdown. As the third option in this offense, I don't think Conklin is viable enough to start anything more as like a streaming tight end. If your tight end was on bye this next week, maybe you have Kittle. In reality, Breece maybe moves down the ranks a bit. Like I'd probably prefer the elite receivers like Jefferson, Chase, St. Brown, Lamb over Breece. But if you're looking at Breece versus running backs rest of season, he's still clearly an RB1 given the upside we have as a receiver. It's just tough when Braylon Allen has work here. And then obviously with Allen, the role's not large enough where you can start him. He doesn't have standalone value. He's still just a premium handcuff back. Now, going over to the Packers. Everybody was upset with our Romeo Doubs ranking. Everybody was upset with our Jaden Reed ranking this week. I do want to reiterate the issue with the Packers is twofold. One, now Jordan Love's injured, which if you have no Love, none of the pass catchers are startable. And two, again, this is what we talk about all the time. But the Packers are going to get so many skill positional players touching the football here. Like just to go through and look at how many players log a rushing attempt. You have Jacobs, Willis, Brooks, Wilson, Reed, Love. How many players see a target? You have Kraft, Dobbs, Reed, Watson, Wicks, Brooks, Melton, Sims, Emmanuel Wilson, Jacobs. Now, of course, there is some overlap. All right, I'm not going to sit here and act like those are all different players. I'm not going to say 16 different players touch the football. But it does go to show that the volume's never here, right? You can go and look at Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed has one game this season with over 6 targets. It's a great offense when Jordan Love's under center, but it's a garbage offense when he's not. I still think when Jordan Love's starting, Reed's a must-start option. Looking at the secondary receivers like Dobbs, Watson, Wicks, you can start him if you need to, but really they're going to be boom bust. If I had to choose a guy between the 3, it would be Romeo Doubs. And then Tucker Kraft comes through with the 67-yard reception. Again, gets you the receiving touchdown, the 78 receiving yards, and the 3 receptions. The man, I believe, at this point has to be leading all tight ends in yards per reception. He only has 3 targets, though. Like, I don't think you can comfortably start Kraft this next week. And you can't start any pass catcher Jordan Love misses. I mean, right now, the report with Love was obviously a high level of concern. I think everybody could see him struggling to move around. It got to a point where we didn't feel like, and he didn't feel like he could protect himself. So, if Love misses any time, RIP. Jacobs comes through and maybe he gives us a little bit of a reason to go, oh, remember, I wasn't maybe that much of a clown for ranking Jacobs over Henry this year. Obviously I was, but it is nice to see Jacobs doing Jacobs things. I do want to reiterate, Jacobs is a must-start running back every single week, especially when Jordan Love's under center because he's a 3-down player in a great offense. Now going to the Jags side of this, Brian Thomas Jr. came through for us. Y'all know our favorite underdog pick and play this week was going through and taking the Malik Neighbors free square for Monday night and the Brian Thomas Jr. line to have a touchdown. And that was $10 to win 40. That has cashed. It's not too late if you haven't taken advantage of the Malik Neighbors pick. You can find that over there on Underdog Fantasy. That's where we're playing every single day. You can find the link in the description comment section. If you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, on top of that, you're going to be getting a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for that Monday night game. That's available if you use code FLOCK on Underdog 3 years ago, 2 years ago, yesterday, today, or tomorrow. As long as you use code FLOCK, you should have a free Malik Neighbors pick. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free Russell Wilson pick, more than less than half a total yard as well for that Monday night game if you're new. And you'll get a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com. I know it's a lot, but let's move this back over to this Jags offense. Lawrence has 300 passing yards. That's great. But Christian Kirk's injured. I don't necessarily think Lawrence is anything more than a potential streamer based off a good matchup. Lawrence gives you the rushing touchdown. Great if you have him best ball. Great if you have him super flex. I don't think it changes anything in a 1 quarterback format. Bigsby gets everything is a rusher here. I wish that he was a little bit better for today for all my best ball teams, but Nonetheless, he still gives you some kind of floor. It's nice to see 3 targets out of the backfield for Bigsby. That is, I believe, a career high. You get 21 total opportunities. Bigsby still remains a must-start guy any week that you have no Travis Etienne. If Etienne comes back in, then at that point, Bigsby goes back to being a running back by committee. And it's supposed to be pretty bad offense. Plus, Bigsby's not a massive receiver, so Bigsby wouldn't be startable with Etienne. And then Brian Thomas Jr., alpha, start him every single week, regardless of what the matchup is, of course. High-end wide receiver 2, rest of season. Could be better if the offense was better. And then looking at Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram comes out with the receiving touchdown. Obviously, don't want to sit here and act like this is absolutely everything. But, I don't know. I think Ingram, Brian Thomas Jr. must-start options. Bigsby's must-start with no ETN. Outside of that, not super excited about anybody. We already know that. Now, going over to this next game, this is what is really exciting here. The Detroit Lions are insane. Near the end of this game, before they pulled Goff, Underdog tweeted this out, and I'm not going to fact check this. I don't think they would tweet this out and lie about it. But at the time of the tweet, the Lions, over the last 4 games, had scored 22 touchdowns and had 14 incompletions. It's mind-boggling. The Lions at this point are the best offense in the NFL, and you'd be foolish to say otherwise. I mean, going through and looking at what you get, yeah, you only have 85 passing yards for Jared Goff. It doesn't matter. If you started any Lion this week, you were happy. I mean, Gibbs comes through, and Gibbs gets you the 127 rushing yards and the rushing touchdown. Montgomery gets you the 33 rushing yards and the rushing touchdown. Montgomery gives you a passing touchdown. Laporta receiving touchdown. Khalif Raymond receiving touchdown. Brock Wright. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everybody here is extremely exciting. I think really the only thing we have to look at is Sam Laporta. And this is what I hate myself more than anything for. So right now in the Flock League, what I need to win is I need like Brock Purdy to outscore Ferguson by like 12 points. I'm probably going to lose. It freaking sucks. But it's my clown ass starting Cole Kmet instead of Sam Laporta, despite the Lions having the highest implied team total of any team in the NFL. Despite the fact that, I mean, Vegas was telling us, it was in our face. I'm happy for all my Laporta teams on Underdog. I'm happy to start Laporta in the future. I don't view him as the top 3 tight end, of course. You just can't with the volume. But he had 6 targets out of 18 potential pass attempts here. So you have a 33% target share for Laporta, which is exciting, but it just freaking sucks that I benched the dude. Definitely mid-tight end 1 rest of season. I can't say he's the tight end 1 in fantasy like we had him coming into the year. Going over to what we have in Atlanta, 4 passing touchdowns for Cousins. Obviously, we've talked about this time and time again, but in the environments in which Cousins comes out here and balls, you're going to expect about 20-25% of that production. Going over to Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney eats. Mooney doesn't change. Still a borderline flex play every single week, dependent on your league settings and matchup. Going over to Bijan Robinson, nothing really changes here either. Bijan Robinson still remains a top 10 running back for us every single week, locked and loaded. I know everybody wants to make fun of me. I know everybody wants to say I'm a clown, blah, blah, blah. Bijan Robinson gets you the receiving floor every single week. The 6 receptions, 37 receiving yards. That's a baseline 10 fantasy points you're getting as a receiver. Then when you can sprinkle on the receiving touchdown, sprinkle on the 63 rushing yards, Bijan Robinson's on a tear, printing 20-point weeks. Tyler Algier has a role here. Algier's just not getting the receiving usage that Bijan is. Algier pretty much just the premium handcuff back, of course, very similar to just Braylon Allen. They're pretty much the same guy. Going over to what we have with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts blows up. I think if you were looking at Pitts going into the future, he was a top 10 tight end for us this week. He's been extremely consistent in terms of the target volume. I don't think we can put him ahead of like Bowers, Kelsey, McBride, Kittle. I don't think you can put him ahead of any of the tight ends that we've seen the volume over a large stretch of games. But I think he's like right there with Laporta as like a must start mid tight end 1 rest of season. But still, I think you start him every single week. And then going through and looking at what we have specifically with Drake London, it's a down performance from London. I'm not really changing anything. I still think London's a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 rest of season. Tampa's interesting to talk about. Now, here with Tampa, maybe I need to give Baker Mayfield an apology. I thought that Baker was Pretty much just going to be like a streaming quarterback, similar to Goff, similar to Darnold, similar to Cousins. Rest of season, now that you have no Evans and you have no Godwin. Baker says, I don't give a damn. Here's 50 pass attempts. Here's 330 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Now, obviously, the efficiency is way down with no Evans, way down with no Godwin. But still, the passing volume is there. Now, if you would have told me coming into this week, Mason Baker's going to have 330 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns, I would have changed my mind on Jalen McMillan. I thought McMillan was a high upside play for rest of season. I didn't want to start in week 1. I wanted to see what the usage looked like. But if you told me you were going to have this passing volume for Baker, I'd have assumed that McMillan crushed it. That didn't happen here. While McMillan sees 7 targets, the issue is what you have in this Bucs offense is similar to what actually looks to be the issue in Green Bay. That even if there's the passing volume, now all of a sudden it's going to be spread out dramatically. You have Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, Sterling Shepard, Ryan Miller, and Raheem Jarrett all playing over 20 snaps. Jalen McMillan plays the most snaps. He does see a total of 59. He runs 46 out of 51 potential routes here in Tampa. So from what I'm looking at with the underlying usage data, I think I'd feel fine moving on from Shepard, feel fine moving on from Palmer, cutting them back off to the waiver wire if you pick them up. Going over to what we have with Cade Otton. Immediately you ranked him as a mid-tight end 1 once you had the injuries to the receivers. I think Cade Otton is 100% that mid-tight end 1. You see him lead the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and fantasy points. Cade Otton, you 100% jam him in every single week. The running back usage is really intriguing. So if you started Rachaad White, you get a great game, right? You get the receiving touchdown, you get the 5 receptions, you get 38 receiving yards. You're very happy from what you get with Rachaad White in a full PPR format. Looking at the underlying usage, however, Bucky Irving sees more opportunities. Bucky Irving gets 9 carries and 7 targets for a total of 16 opportunities. Rachaad White gets 6 carries and 6 targets for a total of 12. Rachaad White plays 41 snaps in comparison to Bucky Irving at 31. Rachaad White runs 27 routes in comparison to Bucky at 16. I think we can safely say at this point that Sean Tucker was a one week thing. You can go ahead and you can cut Sean Tucker. It's just going to be the Rachaad White and Bucky Irving show going into the future. Going over to Arizona, Kyler crushes 300 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. First 300 passing yard game for Kyler so far this season. And when that happens, the top 2 guys are going to eat. You have McBride, you have Harrison, both absolutely crushing. Nothing really changes here. McBride's still an elite top 3 tight end rest of season. Harrison still, that guy that we view with a lot of upside rest of the year. We ranked him as a wide receiver 2 this week. I still probably rank him as a wide receiver 2 this next week, but still will expect that he continues to get better as the season goes on. James Conner sees 20 plus opportunities, gets you the touchdown, doesn't have much of a role as a receiver. But yeah, Conner still locked and loaded RB2. McBride still locked and loaded elite tight ends. Harrison still locked and loaded wide receiver 2 in the short term. Could be better in the long term. You start every single one of these guys every week. You start Kyler every single week as well. It's just a nice game where we actually get the passing volume finally for Kyler. Going over to Miami, this was going to be interesting here. So obviously we are firing up all Dolphins. We were saying you got to start Achane, you got to start Tyreek, you got to start Waddle. Clear plays. Achane comes through. Efficiency through the roof, 9.7 yards per carry. That's what you're used to with Achane with 2 under center. Achane also gets you the receiving usage. He has 8 targets, 6 receptions, 50 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. So if you started Achane, this is exactly what you're looking for, right? He goes right back to being the elite option that he was previously with no Tua. Now, with that being said, it is a little concerning in that Raheem Mostert had the goal line role this week. If you look at this, Raheem Mostert had 2 rushing touchdowns with only 9 carries, 19 rushing yards. Obviously, he doesn't really have a role as a receiver. But I think this is going to eat into the upside case that you have for Achane. Because if you're looking at him, the goal is he's prime Alvin Kamara. He sees everything as a receiver. He sees everything at the goal line. Give Raheem Mostert the meaningless carries between the 20s. But if Mostert has the goal line role, I think it does eat into the upside of Achane. Obviously, you still start him every single week, but that may keep him from being that high-end RB1, and instead he may look like that low-end RB1. Tyreek, still must start option every single week. I know maybe you're disappointed with only 13 fantasy points. He's going to be fine. Waddle only comes through with 6 targets. Waddle sees the same amount of targets friggin' Jonnu Smith, which frustrates me to no end. I started Ladd McConkey over Waddle in the Flock League. Obviously, if we would have gone through, if we would have played Ladd instead, we would have crushed it. But I don't know if I can come out and say I'm benching Waddle this next week. I'm excited about the offense. I think some of it goes through the receivers. Not all the touchdowns go through the running backs going forward. Going over to what we have in Baltimore. This is the game where I got to tell you, I'm sorry. We were way off with this. The spread on the game was 9.5 points. Baltimore Ravens, I thought we're just going to come out here and absolutely steamroll the Cleveland Browns. I'll start with the Browns side of things. Jameis Winston gives you the best performance that we have seen from him since 2019, I want to say. Since maybe pre-COVID. Absurd. I distinctly was very adamant in the live stream this morning that you did not want to roster Jameis, that you did not want to start Jameis, that this was a Browns team that had thrown in the towel. They had already started selling off assets like Amari Cooper. Jameis was their 3rd quarterback on the depth chart before the injuries last week. And Jameis comes out here. He gives 1,000 phenomenal TikTok clips for everybody. And at the same time, he plays one hell of a game. 334 passing yards. 3 passing touchdowns. Obviously not going to give you anything as a rusher. To be honest with you, I know a lot of people are going to rush out there and they're going to play Winston. You could pick him up if you really want to. I don't view him anything more as a streaming option going in the future. Jameis is not a locked and loaded QB1 rest of season. Maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but that's how I'm viewing it. Where I owe you an additional apology is not expecting this type of offensive performance from the Browns. I thought that Tillman was not interesting here. We came out and I was like, Cedric Tillman, a lot of people are going to be picking him up off the waiver wire. I'd rather go after the McMillans. I'd rather go after Ricky Pearsall. And Tillman comes out. You get the 2 receiving touchdowns, 99 receiving yards, and the 7 receptions. Tillman may be a viable flex. If you're going to have over 300 passing yards a game in this Browns offense going in the future, then Tillman may be viable. What's interesting is both Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman out-target Jerry Jeudy here. This is back-to-back weeks where Winston's preferred Tillman over Jeudy. I don't know if that's going to be a consistent trend going into the future. David Njoku is going to be a must-start guy every single week going into the future. Njoku comes out with these 7 targets, 5 receptions, 61 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. This does give me a lot more hope for Nick Chubb going into the future. Obviously, Chubb, we already know you're not going to have anything as a receiver. The efficiency is probably not going to be there post-injury as it was early in his NFL career. But at the same time, if the Browns offense isn't going to be one of the worst offenses in the league, Chubb has some upside. Going over to the Ravens, Derrick Henry remains must-start running back every single week. In environments, obviously, where the Ravens lose, Derrick Henry is going to be less exciting than in the environments in which they win. Zay Flowers actually crushes. With Flowers, it's very hard to project him out with the ankle injury, plus the game environment, which we assumed that the Ravens would be able to run the ball in the second half because they were 9.5, 10-point favorites in this game. But Zay Flowers absolutely crushes. Not much changes for me. I think we had Zay Flowers ranked about wide receiver 24 in the rankings this week. Still, he's going to be that boom bust wide receiver 2 potential play for you. And then looking at tight end, Mark Andrews comes through with the touchdown. They get likely involved, but I mean, here you have a total of 46 dropbacks for Lamar. I don't think you're going to get 46 dropbacks for Lamar. Most weeks going into the future, I'd expect the Ravens actually win and they're able to run the ball. Going over to the Colts, this is just pathetic. I was holding off some hope. I hadn't cut Anthony Richardson last week. I was going, okay, I don't want to cut him. And then all of a sudden, maybe you actually see that he comes through and he gives you some rushing upside and you get a bounce back performance, blah, blah, blah. No, Anthony Richardson, yeah, you get 45 rushing yards, but who cares? The man attempted 32 passes and completed 10 of them. Like, realistically speaking, how the hell could we ever go through and ever start Anthony Richardson? Not a horrible day in fantasy because you do get the 45 rushing yards. Taylor does come out and dominate. Taylor is one of the very few true 3-down bell cow running backs in the NFL. You had the 20 carries, 105 rushing yards, and the rushing touchdown. There's not another running back that sees a single carry in this backfield. Sermon gets a target, but who cares? Taylor's not going to have a massive role as a receiver, which is going to keep him from being that top 3 running back in fantasy, just because AR is not checking the ball down ever. It looks like Josh Downs is officially the wide receiver 1 here over Pittman. Obviously, Downs was banged up this week, so I was expecting that neither Downs or Pittman were going to be startable. And to be honest with you, I don't think Downs is startable in the future. I'd rather pivot off either one of these players if you can. I mean, Downs had 109 receiving yards out of the 175 passing yards from AR. So just not sustainable. Obviously great if you have Downs. I'm excited if you played him for you, but I just think it's very hard to project that going into the future. Going over to Houston, you get a big bounce back game for CJ Stroud in terms of the passing volume. Didn't even crack 100 passing yards last week. You're getting 285. That gets funneled through Diggs, Schultz, Dell primarily. Obviously, it's still a team that wants to run the ball consistently. I mean, we saw Joe Mixon have over 30 rush attempts the last time he played the Colts. This time he has 25 rush attempts, 102 rushing yards, and the rushing touchdown. And you get the 4 receptions, 32 receiving yards as well. Mixon, mid RB1 rest of season. You're starting him every single week, regardless what the matchup is. One of the true 3-down bell cows in a good offense with the target volume as well. Stephon Diggs gets banged up here, so that absolutely sucks. If you have no Diggs and no Collins in this offense, I'll be a lot less excited about starting Stroud this next week. But at the same time, with that being said, realistically speaking, maybe Dell is viable. Maybe you can go through and start Dell with confidence in week 9. Going over to the Buffalo Bills. I had a freaking play against James Cook this week, which sucked. Josh Allen, top 5 quarterback for us. I think he was our QB4 coming into this. We stand by that. You have the rushing upside, obviously the passing volume as well. Allen's a must-start option every single week. James Cook, obviously buy low candidate, must-start option every single week. You get the red zone role and you get the receiving usage in a great offense. Nothing changes there. James Cook, low-end RB1 rest of season. This is what is interesting. I ranked Amari as a must-start option. I thought we were going to see Amari expand his role. I thought that this was going to make maybe the combo of both Shakir and Keon not startable. But no, you get 107 receiving yards for Shakir with 10 targets. You get the 70 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown off of 7 targets for Keon. Thank God for my underdog teams. Amari only draws 1 target. Amari at the same time runs 24 routes in comparison to 28 with Keon, in comparison to 29 with Shakir. So I still think that this is going to be a situation in which Amari's probably the wide receiver 1 rest of season. However, I'm probably not changing my stance with Keon, with Shakir. I think that they are going to be boom bust options. I think you probably do have this as kind of an up and down wide receiver room where a lot of things are going to be spread out. Kincaid still remains a must start tight end every single week. You just don't view him as a top 3 option, more so a mid to low end tight end 1. Going over to the Seattle side of things, Geno Smith implodes. This offense implodes, right? It's just garbage game from Seattle. They're fighting on the sidelines. Geno Smith, they're doing a reiterate. He's just a streaming quarterback, of course. In a good environment with a fully healthy team, you can go through and you could start Geno if you really wanted to. With no DK Metcalf, clearly it's not startable. JSN was the number 1 target earner on this offense. If you have no Metcalf again this week, again, JSN will be a must-start option. Lockett, you get relatively nothing from. I mean, he actually runs more routes than JSN, but you get literally 1 reception for 9 receiving yards. I think you can drop Lockett. Walker is still a running back 1 for me rest of season. You have the receiving usage. I think the offense will be better once DK Metcalf comes in. You drop Lockett. JSN's a must start with no Metcalf. JSN's a borderline flex start with Metcalf. And obviously you're starting Walker every single week regardless, and you don't view Geno anything more as a streaming option. Going over to the Chiefs, here a lot of people are upset with us for ranking Kareem Hunt as an RB2 this week rather than an RB1. The efficiency is not there, of course, because Kareem Hunt's not a running back with a lot of juice left. Obviously, you get the 21 carries, you get the rushing touchdown. Also, he doesn't really have much of a role as a receiver. I'm sorry, but I will still probably continue to rank Kareem Hunt as an RB2 going into the future. If Pacheco comes back in, then Kareem Hunt turns to dust. He's absolutely zero. The Mahomes this week does come out, get you the 2 passing touchdowns. Mahomes was a solid play because of the matchup, but I do want to reiterate that Mahomes is just a week-to-week streamer at this point with the game environments that you typically have here in KC. I'm going over to Kelsey. Kelsey's still a top 3 tight end rest of season. Very clear buy low opportunity in a must-start game against the Raiders. Matchups won't be this good going into the future, but he was due for the positive touchdown regression. Xavier Worthy was that buy low candidate for us as well. I mean, if you are looking at Worthy, I mean, this is now back-to-back weeks with 8 targets, which we absolutely love to see. Keep in mind, he set his career high with 8 targets last week, and now we are getting the continued trend of that usage going in the right direction. Hopkins really disappoints his first week in here. I think that you could make an argument, however, that DeAndre Hopkins is an interesting buy low candidate, but I don't know. I mean, Amari clearly starting slow, changing teams. Adams starting slow, changing teams. Maybe these old dusty veteran receivers just don't have much juice left. And honestly, I'd assume that Hopkins has less juice left than Amari or Adams do. I'm going over to the Raiders. Nothing changes with Minshew. For the love of God, you never start Minshew unless it's a super flex league. Nothing changes with Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison remains a running back that's going to be closing in on 20 opportunities a game, but he's in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, so it'd be very difficult to ever start him, especially in a really tough matchup like this. You definitely can't start him. Bowers remains the target leader here as a rookie tight end with, a decent efficiency mark as well, with all things considered. Bowers still a must-start elite tight end 1 every single week. Myers comes out and he gets the receiving touchdown, leads the team with 7 targets. Am I super excited to come out here and call Myers wide receiver on a GM? No, I'm not too excited about Myers. Garbage offense. I don't think he played anybody but Bowers. Going over to the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins continues to have pretty much everything here as a rusher. You get the 17 carries, you get the 7 targets. So 24 opportunities for Dobbins, must-start player every single week. The main thing is Ladd McConkey may be viable. Ladd McConkey comes through with the massive stat line with the 29 fantasy points, friggin' on my bench. Nothing makes me more upset. But with that being said, you only had 6 targets, right? So honestly, I hate to say it, but I think that this could be a potential sell high moment with Ladd. We'll talk about this later in the week. We'll dive into it a little bit more. But it's still an environment in which you don't have a ton of passing volume here. And the passing volume is being spread out. I'm surprised you see another game with 7 targets for Will Dissly. So they are continuously getting Dissly involved. The Saints side of things, Kamara remains must-start guy every single week. Olave is going to freaking crush when you get Derek Carr back in. Olave this week had 14 targets. Olave 107 receiving yards. The next best receiver is Bub Means with 1 reception for 36 receiving yards. Olave is about to see a 30+% target share rest of the way. Olave is the clearest buy low candidate in fantasy football. Kamara is a great buy low candidate as well. This is just a garbage offense with garbage quarterback play until Derek Carr comes back in. But once Derek Carr comes back in, it's a lot more exciting and everything's going to be funneled through Kamara and Olave. I'm going over to Carolina. Chuba Hubbard gets there just based off the raw opportunity. I mean, you get about 10 fantasy points. Whippy, super exciting. But again, I do want to reiterate, obviously we've had Chuba as a solid candidate for quite some time. That the second that Jonathan Brooks comes in, you're more likely than not looking at Chuba Hubbard as a running back that's in a committee and one of the worst offenses in the league, which will not be a startable option. Looking at what we have with the receivers, Leggett scores a touchdown, has 7 targets, which is nice for our underdog teams. But with that being said, am I super pumped starting? I don't even know why we're talking about Carolina. It's a game I didn't pay attention to at all. It's a game that you shouldn't pay attention to at all. It's an offense that is literally nothing. Going over to the Broncos. I'm freaking pissed here. You had a 10.5 point spread on this game. The Broncos had an implied team total that put them as, I want to say, a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL this week, according to Las Vegas sportsbooks. And here, you know what we end up getting? A massive game from the Denver Broncos and nothing for Javonte Williams. You tell me, hey, Mason, the Broncos are going to win by double-digit points. They're going to be able to run the ball in the second half. You're going to have 4 touchdowns scored in this offense, and Javonte Williams is going to have a total of 21 opportunities. I go, oh my gosh, Javonte high-end RB1 this week, a mid RB1 this week. But no, Javonte gets you a whatever game. Really annoying, at least for me. I thought I was going to get a bunch from him. Sutton goes from giving the goose egg to giving you 100 receiving yards. I don't know what you do here. Obviously, you've started Bo Nix. You're excited about it. Bo Nix gets you the rushing touchdown. You have the 3 passing TDs. Javonte, yet again, another game with 20-plus opportunities. Javonte is trending towards being a week-to-week RB2 play every single week going into the future. I'm going over to Chicago. Dear God, why did I start Cole Kmet? This dude's a freaking bum. I mean, maybe he's not a bum, but Caleb Williams is a bum. Caleb Williams had like 24 passing yards going into the fourth quarter. It was unbelievable. In the fourth quarter, he kind of saves you a bit. He kind of shows a little something. But you have Rome, Keenan, DJ Moore, Kmet all competing for targets and an offense that has an extremely low floor. So Caleb had been trending in the right direction. It is very frustrating to see a performance like this. I didn't think you have to lower expectations across the board. DeAndre Swift, I needed that rushing touchdown at the end. Swift obviously gives you a great game. I mean, DeAndre Swift does come out here and he has the 18 carries. Issue is you have nothing as a receiver, but you do get the rushing touchdown. Going over to the Commanders, Brian Robinson gets you the 16 carries. Brian Robinson gets you the 1 target. So 17 opportunities in an offense that we expect to be pretty good going into the future. I'm excited about Brian Robinson still. I think he's a must-start running back 2 every single week. Terry McLaurin gets you the 8 targets. You get the 5 receptions, 125 receiving yards. Must-start wide receiver 2 every single week going into the future. Zach Ertz has 11 targets, a viable tight end streamer. Don't pick up Noah Brown. Obviously, it's the craziest thing ever where you do get the absolute bomb at the end of the game. But I think nothing changes here in Washington. If you're a Commanders fan, should be extremely excited. Daniel's clearly a must-start elite level QB1 every single week, but nothing does change here. But super fun Sunday with a ton of points scored. I really need Purdy to outscore Ferguson by like 12 points tonight. It's probably not happening. I'm probably freaking taking an L in the flock league. It is what it is. But yeah, what we didn't take an L on was our underdog picks today. We actually turned that $10 pick'em into 40 with the Brian Thomas touchdown and the free pick using code FLOCK on Underdog. If you wanted to take advantage of that, you can still do so. You have the free pick, more than less than half a total yard for Malik Neighbors on Monday night for Underdog Fantasy. As long as you use code FLOCK, whether that was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, yesterday, today, or tomorrow, you get that free Malik Neighbors pick. And if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you get an additional free pick on top of that, more than less than half a total yard for Russell Wilson. Promo code FLOCK is also going to give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 and a free team review in the live stream we're doing every single night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I'm able to hook you up with that free team review voucher. But thank you again. I really appreciate you and really hope you're able to win this week.